Welcome to the People of Penn State podcast. I'm Katie Farnan with the Penn State Alumni Association, and I'm joined today by Chad Littlefield, co-founder of We and Me, best-selling author, and creator of the We Connect cards. Chad graduated from Penn State in 2013 with degrees in psychology and rehabilitation and human services, and got his master's degree here in learning design and technology in 2015. Chad, welcome to the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Hi, Katie.
Hello. So excited to talk to you today.
Me too. On air.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to the beginning and tell us why you chose Penn State.
Okay. So my cousin got married at Penn State, and I was invited to the wedding when I was little. I grew up in Massachusetts, and I went out there, and it was like, imagine every person is like a little plankton in a soda can. And then one day they like pop their head out of the soda can and they realize the soda can's at the bottom of the Marianas Trench. This is maybe a little dramatic, but I feel like when I went to Penn State, I was just like, whoa, like this is so different than everything that I grew up in. Was just really attracted by that. And so in high school, went out with a bunch of friends to visit. And so it was family connection is the short answer.
So it is like decision season for prospective students. What would you tell a prospective student that's like weighing their options right now to convince?
I would tell them that my own mother went to Ohio State. And I went to Penn State.
Here.
And I went to Penn State, and I made the better choice. That's what I would say. No, I would say in terms of decision and choice. So we're gonna start off the podcast deep, Katie. The root of the word decide, right? Pesticide, herbicide. It's like to kill off, to cut out. And so decision, like thinking about cutting out options, whereas choosing for me has some connotation around like I picked it and I feel conviction about it, and there is no buyer's remorse. There's no like and so for me there was a choosing of Penn State. I don't feel like I cut out. It was just like I picked it and that's it. And so for folks in decision season, there's a little bit of and reasons. And I think ultimately tapping into something inside yourself to make a choice rather than purely deciding with logic could be helpful. That's a little bit of a philosophical answer, but
that is the logical way to make a decision. So that was perfect.
Yeah.
And then can you tell us about your Penn State experience, specifically the club that you founded while you were here?
Yes. Okay. So what you might not know about this club, which was called the Clown Nose Club, is when I was half the height I am now, I saw the movie Patch Adams, which now is like this ancient movie. It came out in like 1995. Robin Williams essentially became a doctor to really promote the quality of life over quantity. And in the movie, like it's a phenomenal movie, regardless of its video quality. It's a phenomenal movie where he really has mastered the ability to reach people who are unreachable. So the terminally ill patient that nobody can get to eat, Patch walks into his room and just has a very unconventional way of empathizing and meeting him where he's at. So I saw that movie and I had my whole life figured out. I was like, doctor. Once I settled on Penn State, I was like thinking pre-med, bio major, maybe pediatrician. I'm going to be Patch Adams. And he used humor to really heal and had a magical way of connecting with people. And then I took a single chemistry class my first week of college. And on my birthday, August 25th, was walking back to my dorm and I felt my lip quivering like, oh, I don't know if this is like the plan was starting to fall apart. And so this was my journey, right? I had like really dead set on this, but after a bit of I had a mentor in high school named Eric Tyler who told me, he's like, I've mentored people in high school for 2 decades. Every single person at some point has a little bit of a like life crisis. Oh my goodness, I'm leaving home, all these like this context that is known and I'm entering the unknown, and it's terrifying. And sometimes it happens before college. Sometimes it happens the first week. Sometimes it happens a year in, but he's like, it will happen. And I was like, no. Like 40,000 strangers. This is a playground of possibility. I'm super excited, yada, yada. First week, walking out of the chemistry class, walk back to my dorm in McKean Hall and just like broke, like crying on the floor, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to skip a few pieces to the part where I called Eric Tyler up, lip quivering. Eric. And he just reminded me, and this is maybe one of the most compelling reasons to choose Penn State. He just reminded me, he's like, Chad, you had your whole life figured out. You're going to be a doctor. But do you realize that like you have a choice? You could actually do something else. Have you looked at the list of majors at Penn State? And I was like, no. I just kind of baked my whole life 10 years ago. And when I did, he just invited me to do this very simple task. Print out all the majors at Penn State, which my mind was blown. It was, at the time, it was like 168 or something majors at Penn State. And he was like, just highlight all the ones that sound kind of interesting, curiosity provoking, and then go on a walk and then come back and circle the ones, go back to just the highlighted ones and circle the ones that really are curious to you. And so that's where I landed on rehabilitation and human services and psychology, but I still wanted to be Patch Adams, right? So I was no longer doctor route. I was no longer signed up for 10 years of med school and organic chemistry and all the rest. But I still wanted to be Patch Adams. And so my freshman year, second semester or so, I started this group called the Clown Nose Club. So I had Cirque du Soleil came to the Bryce Jordan Center and just led this unbelievable show, which is also one of the coolest things about Penn State is we have like super world-class entertainment just show up on the doorstep every other week. And that's pretty cool. So we'll go to Cirque du Soleil. They handed out 50,000 clown noses to everybody. Not 50,000. 10,000 clown noses. And just purely as a social experiment, you remember I'm a psychology major now, purely as a social experiment, I decided on my walk from the Bryce Jordan Center back to my dorm, I would just wear the clown nose. Little social risk, little social experiment. And I was pretty surprised to find every single person I walked by broke stride, broke the like, I'm zoned out. Either phones were like, not everybody had an iPhone then, but we were like tuned in, headphones, wired ones, not these wireless things. And like took out a headphone, or they broke this straight face where they were kind of like zombie walking mode and like smiled. Or there was just some positive impact. And I wasn't being crazy walking by. All I did was walk as I normally would with the clown nose on. And it just kind of struck me like that, I think, got to the essence of what Robin Williams in the movie Patch Adams did. He took these social risks with the very positive intent of impacting somebody else. And so second semester, I got inspired to start this Clown Nose Club, and the whole mission and idea was to take positive social risks to have a positive impact on the people around us. And so we would make signs that say, "You rock," and stand outside a bus stop and run on the bus and hand the bus driver a mug filled with candy and just say like, "Thank you so much for getting us to where we need to go."
I love that.
Yeah. So that's the idea. And that kind of like took off. And actually, now I'm thinking about it, that was like a seed that led to many other things. And probably I could trace back like where I am now, what I'm doing now, in some ways to that, like the essence or the pure intention of connection with no expectation of return. And there's something very powerful about that idea. Man, I'm feeling philosophical this morning, Katie. We're just going to be here, right?
I love it. I love it. How many members did you end up having in the club? How many people joined in with you?
Oh my goodness. I don't know. Like it ebbed and flowed between, like, started super small. I have a mentor now, Peter Block, who says the world changes only in small groups. So it started small, but then I remember meetings there was over 100 people, and it spread to like a university in China, and there was one in North Carolina. And
wow.
Yeah, it was like a very, and ultimately fast forward 4 years. My senior year of college was invited, TEDx PSU was happening, and I was invited to give a TEDx talk on this idea of positive social risks. And that, like, for the past 10 years, I've made a living at traveling around as a professional speaker, keynoting big conferences and events, and co-wrote a couple books with a mentor and co-founder who I met at Penn State named Will Wise. And all of that stemmed, though, from Clown Nose Club, and maybe more applicably to everybody listening to this, all of that trajectory and really cool things that unfolded happened not because of that, like that specific club, but because I found something I was really curious about, really passionate about, and poured a lot of effort into something I believed in. It just happened to manifest as a student club, which I think is like a really, here's another reason. I'm just going to embed this. This podcast is going to be titled 25 Reasons to Go to Penn State. So here's the other reason is like, it's a very entrepreneurial, safe way to experiment with entrepreneurship, to start a student organization or even just get involved in an existing student organization, because there's like support from the university to fund. And so like the university helped us buy a whole bunch of clown noses, which we used for events. And whereas when you get out into the real world, like you got to find your own money. Yeah.
Isn't that the truth?
That support is pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question. So you talked about your TEDx PSU speech. So that was like your first TED talk.
Yes.
And then you obviously did one later after college. But what was the experience like doing it at Penn State and then kind of transitioning into the real TED Talks, the real scene?
Yeah. The real scene. Well, here's the transition to real world. So I finished this like little 6-minute talk on positive social risks. And I got off stage and somebody came up to me who was in the audience in Schwab Auditorium and walked up and said, "Oh, that was like really, really amazing. My company's having this retreat in a couple months. How much do you charge to speak?" And remember, I'm a senior in college at this point. So I'm like, will you buy me Starbucks? Like my bars, like, realistically, I was like, a light bulb went off, like, oh, this is a thing. Like if you have a story to tell and you're passionate about an idea and it's useful to others, you can actually get paid to exchange your words and ideas with people. And so that was an aha. In terms of like the real, I think the real going out is actually more than like TEDx. It was going from petri dish of learning and experimentation in college to real world, where I had, as a kid, I remember driving by this abandoned factory in Michigan and just thinking like, wouldn't it have been so cool to just work like for a day, a shadow for a day in that factory, and then the next day get a new job, and then the next day get a new job, and the next day get a new job. And I realized I kind of ended up doing that. It was like one day I'd be at a tech company keynoting a leadership summit, and the next day I'd be giving a series of keynotes at the CIA headquarters, and the next day and it's like I've just bounced all over. And so I get to drop in as this little fly on the wall to somebody else's culture and see the inside of their offices and their spaces. And so that for me was like from TED experimentation, testing things out, to actually applying these ideas in the real world was that felt more like the real thing than any other transition.
Love that. So then after undergrad, you came back to Penn State to get your master's, and your We Connect cards were created in grad school, and you launched a Kickstarter for your capstone project. Tell us about that.
Here's reason number 4 to go to Penn State. In grad school, so the grad program that I ended up landing on, it's called Learning, Design, and Technology, and it was in the College of Education. And as a core part of that program, there's a design studio. At the time, Dr. Simon Hooper was leading. And so there was one semester where we were like learning at that time, like Adobe Illustrator and a handful of other platforms. And, he had projects that were all experience-based. You can create this, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at the syllabus and I was like, cool, I could learn I could do all that stuff. But I also had this idea. I was working at the time in summers, like leading adventure trips for teenagers. And the first part of this week-long program where we'd go caving and mountain biking and whitewater canoeing, etc. The first half day of that week-long program was, quote, team building. So you get a bunch of teenagers to talk to each other and have meaningful conversations. And that looks remarkably awkward. And so I just asked myself, like, what could I put in between two teenagers and allow that conversation to flow easy, to remove the awkwardness, etc. And so I went to Simon Hooper at the beginning of this design studio course and was like, okay, love the syllabus. You've created something really great here. And I have this idea. I'm wondering if I could, I don't even know what it's going to be yet, but I wonder if I can use the design thinking model to create and iterate and test this tool. Maybe it's a card deck, maybe it's a book. I don't know what it's going to be, but create this tool and then actually as a capstone, launch it on Kickstarter at the end of grad school. And that is what I did. And so the deck of this deck of We Connect cards, I created like one cruddy prototype of just for myself to use. And then I used it and somebody asked me like, oh, these cards are really cool. Where can I get them? It's like, you can't. Like, these are, I had, in other words, I had no entrepreneurial inspiration at all to create a second deck. It was like, I was thinking of this as a project. And now well over 100,000 decks have launched themselves out into the world and are being used in schools and universities and organizations all over, to kind of gently skip the small talk and create conversations that matter, which is pretty cool. And that all originated from just a little twist on a syllabus in a course in grad school, which maybe advice too for anybody listening. Like, if you're going to go back to grad school, in my humble opinion, having a purpose in that grad school and not having the purpose be, I want to get a grad degree. Like, choose a purpose, a focus, something you want to dive really deep on, become an expert in, etc. I think that it makes grad school much more personalized, which at a big school like Penn State, you can very easily turn it into a tiny, small school and personalize your own learning by following your curiosity and like choosing a path that way.
I love that. This is great advice. So we've used the cards here at the Alumni Association, kind of different professional development situations, and they're so interesting, the questions, because they start really light, like what's your favorite color, and then they progressively get a little deeper until you're having these really deep conversations with people you never thought you would have these conversations with. So how did you come up with those questions and like figure out what fits into which category?
Yeah. Okay. So there's three categories, right? Questions that are fun and light, questions that are a bit deeper, and then the third one is questions that encourage some level of self-reflection. And the reason I didn't go just like easy, medium, hard, and I have that self-reflection category is conversation, particularly with strangers, possibly around questions that you haven't discussed before, is most introverts' nightmare. And so the category of questions that encourage some level of self-reflection, when I'm using the cards and facilitating groups, I'm inviting people to say, hey, when you're asked a question, it's quite possible you've never been asked that question before. And in our culture, we like feel the need to fill the silence quickly. And my invite is to actually just let the question land, take a minute to think of your own response and not feel the pressure of speed in that connection. Some of it was also like just designer's choice. I wanted to, in my mind, the ideal conversation starter cards, or the ideal icebreaker, if you will, which I've kind of eradicated that term from my vocabulary and I've replaced it with connection before content. But the ideal form of connection before content for me is something that has maximum choice. People have maximum choice of what kinds and types of conversations they end up in. And ideally, something that just teleports people into a really good conversation that is relevant, meaningful, and interesting to them. So in other words, I didn't want to create a set of questions that was just like my curiosity. And so the questions are quite open. And so for every question in the deck, when you're asked that question, there are many, many ways that you could respond to that. So even the deeper questions, right? So one of the blue cards, the deeper questions is, what is one thing life is teaching you right now? So like rolling up to a bus stop and asking someone that question, not a recommended strategy to build a relationship of trust. But if you ask me that question, hey, Chad, what is one thing life is teaching you right now? I could say, life's teaching me to be a better dad. I'm focused on that. And that would be true. And you could also ask me, hey, Chad, what is life teaching you right now? And I could say, oh, I just got back yesterday from a very intense trip to La Jolla, California, meeting with a new mentor advisor, and I just got my like socks rocked and called out in this in the fact that I've been running a business based on the premise of connection, but there are plenty of moments in my life where I've been treating connection as a commodity and not in alignment with really the essence or value of that. So that's two, like same question, two totally different answers. And what I love about the deck and a tool like this is you get to choose. And so reminding people you have all the power to choose any response to any question you're asked, which for me is a compelling and important idea when we think about how we relate to each other.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially because, if you're with people you've never met before, you don't want to go too deep right away. But
Yep.
eventually, if you're with coworkers who you're closer with, you realize that you kind of have that connection and you can talk to them a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Yeah. You can easily, and I think natural curiosity is incredibly inviting for people. So if I wasn't curious and I was like, hey, Katie, what is life teaching you right now? Like that would feel quite confronting. But I was like, hey, Katie, I know this is odd and we're just meeting. And I'm just finding myself really curious. You're like at Penn State, this place where for me was filled with so much learning. I'm really curious, what is one thing life is teaching you right now in like this current season? That feels different. It's the same question, but it's like framed really differently. I think natural curiosity it can be quite disarming. I'm not encouraging all people to just launch in with that question. But I do feel like I exist on the planet to gently eradicate small talk and create conversations that matter. And so I'm not actually a fan of saying, oh yeah, you know what? We just have to get through the where are you from? What do you do? What's your major? Like the 5 questions that are always asked before we can have a real conversation. I'm standing in the place that I think that quite early on, you can have a real conversation. It just doesn't have to be about deep childhood secrets or something.
Right.
Right.
Important distinction there.
Yes.
So what is We and Me doing now? Where has this project taken you to current day?
It's an exciting time to ask this question because I'm switching a handful of things up. And so I had a co-founder who I met at working at World in Conversation at Penn State. His name's Will Wise. He passed away 3 years ago. The long story there is cancer sucks. So for the last 10 years, I've done a lot of traveling, speaking, writing. We co-wrote a book together called Ask Powerful Questions, created a handful of other tools in addition to the cards. And so it's like that side of things has been really successful. But what I'm extremely passionate about now is I'm hosting this event that I think will grow into something bigger called the Connectors Summit. And so it's going to become a main focus of my work, whereas as opposed to going into JetBlue Airways or the CIA or any other private institution for a private engagement, I'm hosting my own events, particularly this Connector Summit, which is intended for people who are responsible for the well-being of a group. So whether it's a leader, a facilitator, a trainer, somebody who is actively working with and trying to meaningfully connect and engage groups and pulling those people together. And so this last year that I hosted the Connector Summit, I asked, every one of the 500 people that turned up, how many people do you think you will personally be impacting or facilitating directly next year? And the average number was 1,000 people, which means that when you have 500 connectors in a room together, that just the second degree impact of that is 500,000 people, which is really compelling. So I'm pouring a lot of my focus into this Connector Summit, creating a really phenomenal event, pre-post learning experience. And that is all, there's a lot that's shaping up there, but I'm shifting around work because I live in, that's the short answer of what I'm up to now.
So what's it like to see this project that kind of started as your capstone project become what it is, and seeing companies like Starbucks and big universities using these to bring their employees together?
Yeah. I have 2 responses to that. One is like a ego-filled response. I'm thinking about Steve Jobs, the first time he saw somebody using an iPhone out in the wild, and like the experience of being like, whoa. And so now I'm like, this stuff is out in the world enough that I'll pretty regularly, on a daily basis, get multiple message of this is how we use the We Connect cards. This is what's going on with them, or this, I'm in the middle of reading Ask Powerful Questions, and this is what's showing up for me. And so seeing that impact happen, that is really, really satisfying. It's a very cool thing to think about while I'm hanging out with my 5-year-old or my 2-year-old. There's somebody on planet Earth having a conversation that they never otherwise would have had because of this little thing that I created back with Simon Hooper in grad school at Penn State. So that's on one level. On the other level, I feel like I still am at freshman year and I am beginning something. It feels like on the like a tipping point or edge of becoming something much greater that I would. Yeah. So if you asked me freshman year, do you think you would have ended up where you are now? Like, heck no, zero chance, like zero ability to predict where I am now. And I think the same is probably true for me and everybody else on planet Earth if I look at 10 years from now. So I feel I'm at this like very humble place of like, ooh, at the very beginning, like what will 10 years from now, what will all of this stuff look like? And I feel quite excited about that. Quite excited about that possibility.
Great. Love that.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to get philosophical again. I know that you were into getting philosophical.
Kind of just stuck us here, Katie. So yeah. All right. Hit me. What do you got?
So there's a trend on social media right now that's kind of based on a poem, and it's people who are having coffee with their younger selves, the younger version of themselves. So they kind of explain what that experience is like, what the younger version's wearing, what they order, the questions the younger version of them asks. So what would that experience look like for you?
If I were to if I were to go back and ask questions to my younger self.
If your younger self, you were going to have coffee with the younger version of yourself,
got it.
What would the interaction look like?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's a really, really, I didn't know this was a trend. I must be out of the loop. This is I'm glad that it's a trend because it's a very compelling concept. So I'm having coffee with my younger self, let's say freshman year of college, Chad. I'm going to skip to the end real quick of that coffee meeting. I would probably leave that coffee meeting like on fire, buzzing, unable to like not go take action and pursue and create and build. I'd like to think that younger me would be really, really curious and possibly see in my future self, like, whoa, I think you might have my dream job, dude. And now I'm putting myself in my current shoes because it's funny, like every couple of weeks, somebody reaches out who's at like starting their career and they're like, oh my gosh, I just saw your stuff. I followed your YouTube channel. I'm like, you have my dream job. Can we meet? Can I? And, this is very humbling, or this is very useful for me right now. It's like possibly the most impactful gift would be setting all time constraints and ego and whatever aside and just being as useful as humanly possible to my younger self. What a gift it would be to like look at my younger self and be like, you got something amazing here. Like, I'd love to flesh it out with you. I'd love to think through this and like stay in touch, like email me every few months and like let me know updates of how things are going. For me, that is coming back into this alignment of like, that feels like true connection. Whereas now, if I'm really honest, a year ago, or actually even a couple months ago, somebody reached out and he was so persistent. He was like 5-6 emails in a row that I had ignored the first 3 or 4 of as a test to see how persistent he was. And I finally met with him. And if I'm totally honest, I probably treated that conversation a bit more transactional rather than a connection. So I'd like to think that if I go back to that now, would really just like full on be present with helping this kid get to his next stepping stone. There you go.
It is a very deep trend, I will say.
It is,
but I love
yeah.
it because you really see like, how far people come and the conversations that they would have. And so I had to throw it in there just because as a social media admin, it's always close to my heart.
I know you're probably going to ask another question. I just want to pause for 4 seconds and say, Katie, I know that like before we hit record, you were like, this is my first podcast I'm recording. You are like a natural at this and quite meant to do it. So I'm publicly affirming you on the record that you're really good at this. And yeah,
Thank you. You heard it here first, people. So I do have another question. So you were a 2024 recipient of the Alumni Achievement Award from the Alumni Association. And for the people who are watching or listening, we consider that our Young Alumni Award because it recognizes alums who are 35 and younger who are just excelling in their fields. So for young alumni who maybe are just graduated within the last year or two and they're kind of figuring out their path, what advice would you give them?
possibly the same advice that I would give a freshman in college also, and possibly the same advice that I would give somebody who's 45, 55, and 65, which is taken from, I don't have the verbatim quote near me, but I think it's Elizabeth Gilbert maybe said, I don't know, a book and a speech somewhere. So the idea of like, most people on earth haven't found their passion. And yet there's a narrative, especially in a contemporary culture, of like, find your passion, do what you love, right? And Elizabeth basically says, forget about your passion for now, just for a minute. Let go of your passion and follow your curiosity, because it will likely lead you to what you're passionate about. And I think that for a young alum, like, let go of all the pressure of like finding the one thing and just lean into the joy of like, what am I curious about right now? And I think we live in an age that's like never been more fun to be curious, because of access to people and ideas. And, like, you're wondering about things, like, you can go, we have this whole like AI thing going on right now that you can be infinitely curious to a body of information that has previously like never been accessible. So you can like, so just say, hey, I'm going to talk for 5 minutes about the things that I've like transcribed 5 minutes of things that I have liked and enjoyed and I'm curious about. And then can you just hear that and then pop out 25 different career directions for me? It's like, you could do that right now on ChatGPT as soon as you're done listening to this. And so for me, it's like, not just follow your curiosity. It's like, no, really be voraciously curious and active. And I think particularly don't follow it all with artificial intelligence, follow that curiosity with human intelligence, maybe more so. And for sure, Penn State alum, like, unless someone doesn't even see your email because they have 3 gatekeepers before you actually reach them. If someone's a Penn State alumni and you reach out to them and they are also a Penn Stater, there is like instant rapport. And so we have one of the largest alumni associations on earth, which means that you have more life experience, more human beings with knowledge and ideas and your best interests in mind than anybody else. This is reason number 17 to go to Penn State. Yeah, so like, be curious within the alumni association and the alum network.
Yeah, use that network. We have a ton. We've noticed that, your email, even if it's, a little lower in the inbox, it tends to rise up when they see that Penn State affiliation.
Like,
So,
yeah.
yes.
Indeed.
All right. So we're going to lighten it up a little bit. We like to do a lightning round of questions, just Penn State related questions, since we were so deep and philosophical earlier.
This was, man,
it
caught
was
me at a moment.
Yeah. All right. So are you ready for lightning round? All right.
Lightning away.
Favorite creamery flavor?
Every flavor. And I stand by that. I will not pick creamery ice cream.
Whatever they're going to give you, you're taking, but not together. Just whatever they're going to give you.
Correct. Yeah. No, I could go to the creamery every day after lunch and after dinner and just say, and then they say like, what flavor would you like? I could just say random, please. And I would be equally happy every time walking away from the cash register.
Surprise me is the answer.
There you go.
What Penn State sport are you buying tickets for first? What line would you sit in for hours?
Oh, I am really keen to bring my 2 kids to a football game. I have not brought them to a football game. So that's for sure one. But also, me and my son have been like, I'm not a hockey person, but I'm coming back and watching a hockey game, which I never did while I was at Penn State. But yeah, I've become fascinated with hockey.
Great experience. What was your favorite class and or professor while you were in college?
Oh, don't make me pick.
You can do multiple.
Oh gosh. Okay. So I learned, this isn't true of all 400 level classes, but I learned freshman year that you can take some 400 level classes. So I ended up in a 400 level criminal counseling and rehabilitation course with a professor, Greg Gertner, who's probably not there anymore, who like counseled inmates at Rockview Prison for 40 years, retired, and decided he wanted to teach Penn State. And that class was just like, holy smokes, talk about challenging the limits of connection. So definitely that one. And then for sure, the 2 that were easily most life transforming One is called Soch 300, which is so Social 19 with Sam Richards, and then you go into Soch 300, which is, or you can, where you become a facilitator for Social 19. You get trained by this group, World in Conversation. Like if you're listening to this and you're going to Penn State, like look up World in Conversation, get involved with that. That was super transformative in so many ways. So massive call out to Social 19, Social 300, Sam Richards and Lori Mulvey at World in Conversation. And then the next one would definitely be an intro to counseling class that I took with Jeff Hayes. And that class was extremely transformative. I still consider Jeff a mentor. We stay in regular communication with each other. I ended up meditating with Jeff regularly all throughout college. And that was just that course, but also particularly Jeff Hayes is one of those people, you meet him and like everything else around you disappears and you're just fully present with somebody. Just, very intense in an excellent way kind of person.
Love it. Your favorite local restaurants when you're back in town, where are you going? It could be somewhere that's still here or somewhere of the past. Or both?
Yeah, I don't know if it's still there. Cozy Thai is probably still there. I love me some
Still
Cozy
here,
Thai.
yep.
And Wings Over with sweet chili, like sweet Thai chili sauce, like profoundly unhealthy, but so good.
It's a classic.
And I will get it. Any return trip to State College, it's happening.
Perfect. And then last but not least, who would be your dream Penn State dinner guest? If you could have dinner with any Penn Stater, who would it be?
Oh, interesting. I'm going to cheat and answer that lightning round question with a quote that Jeff Hayes gave me, which is the best way to kill a question is with an answer. I don't have an immediate answer to that, but my commitment to you is I'm going to come up with an answer. I'm going to do some research on Penn State alumni and find somebody who I would love to connect with. And in the next 30 days, I'm going to connect with them.
Perfect. We're gonna let the people know.
All right.
When we post this, it'll be in the description.
Yeah.
All right, Chad. Well, those are all of the questions I have today. So thank you so much for joining us and being part of this conversation. I had so much fun talking with you today.
Thank you. Wait, I'm gonna cheat. Remember, I primed earlier the question, what is one thing life is teaching you right now? We just had this conversation. It's your first podcast recording. I'm curious, what is one thing life is teaching you right now, Katie?
That life begins at the end of your comfort zone.
Ooh. All right.
I was ready. I was ready for that.
Yeah, you were ready. He's like, he's going to ask me. I know. Super lovely to chat, Katie.
Thank you so much. Have a great one.